Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Welcome to the 7th episode of the Meet the Mancunian podcast, Season 4. I'm Deepa Thomas Sutcliffe, your friendly host. On the streets and nooks of Manchester, my inspiring Mancunian guests tackle their causes with their grit and passion. They are leaders, worker bees, and community hosts, and they share their stories to inspire you all through this season. Relax, grab a brew, and listen in to the Meet the Mancunian podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcasting platforms. You can also check out all the episodes on my new website, www.meetthemancunian.co.uk. Looking to help the disabled? We hear from Ben Andrews, author and Managing Director, Beyond Empower, in this episode. I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Ben Andrews, author. Thank you, Ben, for joining me today.
Cheers, Deepa. Thanks for having me.
Great to meet you on a rainy day. It's nice to be inside and watch the rain from
Yeah, I know it is nice to listen. I'm just listening to the rain in the office now, and it's quite nice to be indoors while all that's going on outside.
So tell us about your passion for helping the disabled and for diversity and inclusion. How did you develop that?
Yeah, so my passion comes from my own experience. So I'm registered blind. I have a degenerative visual impairment, retinitis pigmentosa, which involves the rapid deterioration of my eyesight. It's an hereditary condition, something I share with my mum and my granddad. And it means that for now, I've got sort of poor vision generally. I have trouble differentiating between colours. And the biggest sort of issue is night blindness. So I have very poor vision in dull or dark lighting. So it's something I've grew up around. It's something that's always been a part of me. As I've said, my mum had the same condition. So we're seeing some of the barriers that she overcome as a blind person with a more progressed condition in the stage that I'm at now. And I think growing up around that just gives you a bit of a different perspective around how places just aren't built with disabled people in mind. So I think growing up with it, that's where the initial passion come from. And then it's just sort of spreading that message and trying to think about how we can make places better for more disabled people beyond just people with visual impairments, which is my own experience. And I think the other side of it is, for me, I've always been quite interested in history and how some communities over the years have been oppressed for lots of different reasons. And I think sort of disabled people have experienced that and are still experiencing it. So sort of the biggest driver for me is just to try and create a bit more of a level playing field where we're all treated the same. There's more awareness and acceptance.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, that lived experience is always a great way to give you a very unique lens on the concern, and it's a very significant one. So you started with writing a children's book a children's book series called Better Places. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Better Places picture book series has come from about 12 years of working with adults to try and help them make places better for disabled people. And I think the most common sort of statement that gets said back to me when we're looking at adjustments that can be made for disabled people or how places can be better is, I just never thought of that. That's the response I get a lot of times of adults. And that's, working with local authorities, the NHS, community groups, infrastructure teams, lots of different places. So it doesn't come from a place of intent or malice to make places exclusive of disabled people or to try and push disabled people out of places. It just comes from a place of lack of awareness. So the thinking behind the books really was to try and support the next generation to have that awareness, just part of who they are, how they operate. So as they grow into adults who are making these decisions, they're just not putting the barriers in place to begin with.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And is it one of a book series, or is it just a single book, or anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, so the first series is Better Places, the Street series, and that's got 5 books. And they'll all be focused on how we can make street design better for disabled people, and that'll be people with visual impairments, wheelchair users. It'll be a sort of a variety of different people with different access needs. So the first book in the series is Better Places, Nicky and Candy Street, and that is due to release February next year, and that's specifically around street access for blind and visually impaired people.
Thanks so much, Ben. And then, of course, you have your firm, Beyond Empower, where you work with disabled people and support them to have a better life. So, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Beyond Empower has been something I've been working on for about 12 years now, since about the age of 17, as well as sort of my condition that I mentioned before. When I was about 17, I really started getting into fitness, and I started seeing issues within the sort of the fitness industry for disabled people. So that's how it sort of started, Beyond Empower, trying to make places in leisure more accessible for disabled people. And then it's branched out from there now. So we offer services across Greater Manchester to work with groups or individuals who are disabled, find out what their interests are, go out into the community, find those opportunities, and work to make them accessible and support disabled people to access them. So it's been a long journey to get to that point, but yeah, we're there now, and it's really good. Got a good team of 7 who are out there making a real difference to not just disabled people. I think that's where people associate us with just sort of making a difference for disabled people's lives, but for me, it's the societal change that's the sort of the biggest thing. So, as well as working with disabled people, we also work with lots of other environments, leisure centres, infrastructure, design, and those places need our help as much as disabled people in some way. They need the help to make their provision more accessible and inclusive.
That is great because, recently spoke to another guest who was talking about making theater accessible. But, you're very right. Leisure centers and many other things are probably designed for not always in the most supportive way for people to access it. So that's it's a great cause. Thank you for doing what you do. But
Thank you.
there must be many challenges that you've had to overcome in this journey. So can you tell us about some of them and how you've overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, setting up a business for anyone can be quite challenging, especially when you're coming at it from sort of a social angle. I think it does take you some time to appreciate not everybody's coming at it from that angle. So then, a bit of advice that I've picked over the years is how can you reframe what you're doing to satisfy others' agendas? Because it does cross a lot of agendas. This, for disabled people, opening up more spaces allows disabled people to contribute to the local economies more. It's a better use of spend because you're creating services that work for more people. So when I initially started, it was all about this is the right thing to do. We should be doing this for disabled people. And then over the years, you sort of think, well, actually, I think people all buy into that as individuals. But when you're working with institutions, it might need to be put across in a bit of a different way. So I suppose initially it was a bit of a barrier learning that, but now it's a real game changer in the way that once you know what sort of people want or the institutions want, you can sort of frame it in a way that sort of satisfies what they need to hear. And then I suppose from a personal perspective, there's not been that many sort of barriers that can relate to sort of my vision or anything like that. Really, this is the hardest time of year when it's dark nights and you've sort of got to juggle because that's where I'm most affected in the dark, and I've got to sort of juggle meetings. So I'm, back home while it's still a bit light outside, and then so that's a difficult dynamic sometimes. But the beauty is with sort of having your own company and developing as an entrepreneur is your days can be as flexible as you want them. You can book meetings around you. So again, maybe initially a barrier, a bit of learning, but as I've sort of grown and settled into the role, I now sort of work it so it works for me.
Which is so true, right? As an enterprise, if you can work to what's more comfortable for you, and also I really like that about framing the narrative for corporates to and institutions to really understand, rather than saying it's about the rights of disabled people. It's about maybe giving public funds and making it applicable to a larger part of the community. That makes so much sense. Thank you. What impact have you made so far?
Lots of impact. So we've reached hundreds of disabled people to support them to access activities of interest. We've reached tens of organisations, working with them to make their provision more inclusive. And the beauty of it is, even if we work with one disabled person and one activity, and we change that activity for that person, then we don't have to reach all the other disabled people with the same issue, because that activity is now more inclusive, so they can just take greater ownership of disabled people. So I think that's the next stage for us, trying to capture that wider impact. And then those are sort of we help disabled people sustain activity independently by changing that environment. So we collect some sort of impact information around that. But the biggest thing that I enjoy, well, more reading now than actually achieving myself. I used to be on the ground a lot, and I'd see firsthand the difference that was happening in people's lives. Whereas now I'm sort of reading it through reports of the team, which is still really nice. I do get a buzz off it, and that's my way of staying connected in a way. And so we've had people who've gone from sitting at home watching the same programs on repeat day after day. No one really giving them a chance to do anything else. It's just sort of, I think sometimes it's accepted that you're disabled, you're going to stagnate, you're going to deteriorate. There's only so much you can do. You're best off being looked after all day, and that type of narrative is just quite an old outlook. It's quite dated. So we've had people who've been sat at home all day, not really doing much, and then they've connected with us because the GP might have referred them because they've put on some weight or they're showing signs of depression. And then they've said they're interested in the gym. They want to start dancing. They want to start drama. We'll go out into the community. We'll find those activities. We'll work with the provider to make them accessible, and then we'll support them into it. And this is an actual case, what I'm describing here, without naming any names. But this person has now gone on to keep going to the gym. They've made friends there. They now attend dance and drama regular. So it's those type of things. When you look back through the story, and we're talking like 3 years, 4 years on now from when we actually started working with them, and that has had a real impact on that person's life, not just from improved physical health, but also sort of expanding social circles, doing something stimulating, doing something purposeful with the days. And yeah, I get a lot from that, and hopefully the people that we're working with do too.
I'm sure they do. How can interested people reach out to you or learn more?
Yeah, so my social media is always at Ben Andrews Inc. So you can catch me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I also post regular content on YouTube to do with topics and issues to do with disabled people. If it's anything relating to Beyond Empower and helping disabled people get more active and mainstream environments becoming more inclusive, that's at beyondempower.co.uk. And then anything related to the books is betterplaces.uk. So yeah, a few platforms there, but all of it will run through at Ben Andrews Inc. So that's the best place to start.
No problem. I'll add your websites to the show
Thank you.
notes, so that'll be easy for people to find. What advice would you have for people looking to start something similar in another part of the world or another part of the UK? As we said, we have listeners from 43 countries, and we might, some of them might get inspired by your story and look to see what they could do to make their communities more inclusive, more supportive of disabled people.
Yeah, I'd say, similar to previous podcasts that I've listened to on here, I think the first step is just going for it, sort of committing yourself and saying, I'm going to create the space to really think about this and work on it, and just get out there, put yourself out there. I'm a firm believer, if something's making sense in your mind and you've got lived experience of it, then go for it. And other people will say, that might not work, or you're never going to make anything of that, but you've got the lived experience there to work off. They might not have, so it makes sense in your head, maybe not there. So then it's just a case of proving it, and time and time again, people are proving that that's possible. So I'd say create the space for it, and just enjoy it. Don't rush it. I think, especially when you're trying to achieve something socially, you sort of have, am I making an impact? Am I doing anything right? This could be better. This could be more efficient. But we're all sort of stood on the shoulders of giants from previous generations who've got us to this point, and you're just adding to that platform. So you might not see the change that you want to in your lifetime. Some people might think, well, that's a bit depressing. Why can't I see it? I want to see it now. But I think it's something satisfying, that knowing we're just all chipping away at the same things, and we're all collectively going to get there. But yeah, so it's part of a bigger picture sort of thing, and be content in that, be happy with knowing that.
I really like that about taking the time as well as, trusting your gut or your instinct because you've got that lived experience. You know, you can make the benefit happen. So, really good tips. Thanks so much for that. An opportunity for you to talk about anything that I haven't asked you about.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered. I think we've covered most things. I think the biggest thing coming up for me, as I said, is the Better Places Nicky and Candy Street, which is about a young blind girl Nicky and a white cane Candy, and they're on a trip to a friend's house where the journey proves a bit difficult, and it's the book asks the reader to help make the street a better place. So that is available for pre-order now, and it'll be out in February 2023. So yeah, that's the big upcoming for me, and that's something I'll be working on, sort of getting out there in the next few months.
Thank you. So I now move to the signature questions that I ask all my guests. And the first one is to describe the Mancunian spirit in a word or a phrase.
Oh, I think grit. I think grit is probably an appropriate term. Like you do just crack on, and you have to get by in circumstances that aren't always that great. But you do crack on, and you do achieve. And I think there's many Mancunians that have proved that. And yeah, I'd say sort of grit.
It's a great one. Um, Definitely one that I can see through the guests as well. Can you share a Mancunian who inspires you and why? You can choose one who is living or one in the past as well.
A Mancunian who inspires me. I think I'm 99% sure he's Mancunian, but he's a poet called Tony Walsh, and he did a poem when well, he's done poems for years, but he did a poem when um, the sort of terrorist attack on the MEN, and that really blew up in Manchester, and he's helped me out with sort of he inspires me as a poet and someone who's really good at his craft. But also when I first started writing the books, I got connected with him, and he's just been really helpful ever since. So aside from his fame and how good he is at what he does, he's just a really lovely person. So yeah, I'd say he's a person who inspires me most.
Thank you for sharing that. What's the most important life lesson you've learned?
I think the most important life lesson. So I have two sort of that conflict in some ways, but one is I do think that if you ever want to achieve what you want to achieve, then you do have to work hard. Like you do have to put the graft in, and you have to set yourself a time aside and really apply yourself to it. But in the same breath, you need to enjoy yourself. So I'm sort of still learning that. I think we're always trying to find balance in that. We need to work hard when we need to work hard, but aside from that, spend time with family, enjoy yourself, do the things that you want to do, because you never, from all the stuff that I hear and read, you never get anyone on the deathbed saying, I wish I would have worked harder. It's always, I wish I would have spent more time with my loved ones. I wish I would have worked less in some cases. So I think don't let yourself get to that point, knowing what we know now. Do it now, enjoy yourself, and spend time with your loved ones. And that's the most important thing.
That's a really great tip, and I think it is one that we need to always balance, right? It's like that, it's a constant challenge, work-life balance, as they say,
Yeah.
and it's easy to go in the work mode, but to forget those little moments that you won't get back.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can find a creative outlet as well, I think that's what I found with the books. In that managing a company is brilliant, and especially when you're passionate about it, I love it. But I didn't really realise that there was probably although we are really creative within the business and we're always innovating and thinking of new ideas, there's a different style of creativity, sort of what I found through writing the books and working out the characters and being a bit silly with the stories, that I found has really satisfied maybe an element in life that I'd long forgotten from childhood. But I've been given the opportunity to run with that now, and I'm really grateful for it. So I would say, whether it's learning an instrument, writing a book, starting a podcast, editing videos, whatever it might be, put a bit of time aside for you and do something a bit creative and fun that you can have fun with.
Absolutely. Great tip. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I think flying would be a good superpower, wouldn't it? Being able to fly. I want to go travelling, so being able to fly around, yeah, it'd be amazing. You wouldn't want me flying around in the dark, though. I'd probably bang into a building, but, but yeah, flying in the day, you'd be all right.
That sounds like a great superpower. Is there a funny story you'd like to share with listeners?
Um, One comes to mind, and it's to do with my eyesight actually. So I used to be a health trainer before. In my second year of uni, I got a job as a health trainer, and that was supporting Salford residents to improve their health generally. Could be related to employment, housing, general health, like wanting to lose weight, whatever it might be. And this particular day, I was going to a home visit with a colleague because we had to do home visits in pairs. And it was in this big block of flats in Eccles. So we've got out of the car, we've walked up to the block of flats, and I've looked up and I've seen this guy dressed up in an Elvis costume. So I've like pointed up to my colleague and said, "Look, there's Elvis," and just laughed. And she sort of just sniggered and didn't really make much of it. And I thought, that's quite funny, just someone stood up there dressed as Elvis. So then we couldn't get in the actual flat. We had the flat number, but we couldn't get in the actual building to go and see the client. So we was getting a bit, we need to get there on time. So I said, I'll go and ask. And she must have been thinking, are you going to ask? So I walked back to the front of the building and I've shouted up to Elvis, excuse me, how do we get in this building, mate? And he had no response. And I thought that was a bit rude. And then my colleague comes around the corner and goes, Ben, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just asking the guy up there how we get in, and he's not responding. And it turns out she was in stitches. It wasn't a person, it was a cardboard cutout of Elvis. So I've been shouting to a cardboard cutout in the middle of Eccles, asking him, how do I get into the flats? So, yeah.
That's a really great story. Yep. But it happens to all of us, don't they? We think that something looks more realistic than it should. And they use that in, I think they do like tiger stuffed toys in wildlife sanctuaries in India to kind of keep the monkeys away. So you're in good company. Don't worry about that.
That's reassuring, Deepa. Thank you.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed learning about health, diversity and inclusion today. And thanks so much, Ben, for sharing that. It was a real pleasure.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me, Deepa. Thank you.
Ben, I really enjoyed learning about helping the disabled today. Dear listener, thank you so much for listening to the 7th episode of the Meet the Mancunian podcast, Season 4. I hope this episode and the podcast itself encourages you to follow your passions, inspired by the amazing Mancunian guests who feature here. Tune in every Tuesday for a new episode, or log on to www.meetthemancunian.co.uk to listen to all the episodes and learn more about my podcasting story. Next week, on Tuesday, 10th January 2023, the Meet the Mancunian podcast talks to Sarah Revington about sustainable fashion. Please do leave a review or a voice message on my website www.meetthemancunian.co.uk. It takes only a few minutes. Thank you.